Genial. Carter arrived at the Meridian Crown Hotel just after sunset, when the city outside glowed with reflected light and quiet confidence. The hotel lobby looked like wealth-made physical polished marble floors, gold-edged counters, soft music humming beneath the air conditioning. Everything about the place was designed to feel exclusive. Daniel fit the setting. Easily, he wore a tailored navy coat, clean shoes, and carried himself with calm assurance. Nothing about him suggested uncertainty or lack of means. Still, the moment he stepped toward the front desk, something shifted. The receptionist looked up, smiled briefly, then hesitated. "Good evening," Daniel said. "I have a reservation. Daniel Carter." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "One moment, sir." Minutes passed. She frowned at the screen, typed again, then disappeared into the back office. Daniel stood quietly, hands resting on the counter. He noticed the way a security guard's posture straightened, the way a couple nearby glanced at him, then away. The receptionist returned. "I'm sorry, sir. There seems to be a system issue." Daniel nodded. "I've already paid."
Yes,
"Of course. Please have a seat while we resolve this." He stepped aside and sat on a leather couch facing the desk. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for a manager. He waited. 5 minutes later, a white couple walked in, laughing softly. They approached the same desk. A different receptionist greeted them warmly. "Welcome. Checking in. Reservation under Miller." "Of course. Right this way." Keys were handed over in less than a minute. Daniel watched, expression unchanged. Another staff member approached him. "Sir, unfortunately, we're overbooked tonight." Daniel looked up calmly. "Interesting. I booked 3 weeks ago." "Yes, well, these things happen." "I see. We can issue a refund." "I'm not asking for one." The man hesitated. "Then, I'm not sure what else we can do." Daniel leaned back slightly. "I'll wait." The staff exchanged looks. Time stretched. The lobby slowly emptied. The music looped. Daniel pulled out a small notebook and began writing. Dates, times, names, exact phrases. A manager eventually appeared, a woman with practiced politeness and tired eyes. "Mr. Carter," she said, "we sincerely apologize. Tonight just isn't going to work." Danielle met her gaze. "For me?" She blinked. "Excuse me, you have rooms," Daniel said evenly. "Just not for me." The manager stiffened. "That's not." Daniel raised a hand gently. "I'm not here to argue." Silence settled between them. "What are you here for, then?" she asked. Daniel closed the notebook and stood. Documentation. The word landed heavier than he expected. He reached into his coat and removed a folder. Inside were contracts, identification, and a single letter stamped with a corporate seal. "I'm a senior compliance auditor," Daniel said. "Your hotel was selected for a blind evaluation." Color drained from her face. "This interaction," Daniel continued, "has been recorded in detail, along with timestamps, staff behavior, and comparative service." The manager swallowed. "We can correct this immediately." Daniel shook his head. "No. You've already shown me what I came to see." Within hours, corporate executives were involved. Emails flew. Phone calls escalated. The staff avoided Daniel's eyes as he sat quietly, still calm, still patient. Eventually, the manager returned. "Your room is ready," she said softly. Dano took the key. "Thank you." Opened the quiet of his suite. Daniel finally allowed himself to breathe. Not relief, just acknowledgement. He hadn't wanted special treatment, only equal treatment. The next morning, his report was submitted. Policies would change. Training would be mandated. Quiet consequences would follow. No headlines. No drama. Just truth, recorded. As Daniel checked out, the same receptionist from the night before looked at him differently. "Have a good day, sir," she said. Daniel nodded. "I will," replied, but somewhere inside the Meridian crown, things would never feel quite the same again. And that was enough. Daniel did not sleep much that night. The suite was quiet, expensive in the way silence itself felt purchased. The city lights spilled through the tall glass windows, reflecting off polished surfaces. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt familiar. Another reminder of how often dignity had to be proven instead of assumed. He sat at the desk, laptop open, documents neatly aligned. His notebook lay beside him, pages filled with careful handwriting. Not angry words, just facts. At 7:42 p.m. Initial greeting. At 7:47 p.m. Asked to wait. At 7:58 p.m. White couple checked in. At 8:03 p.m. System issue mentioned. Patterns mattered more than emotion. Daniel had learned that early in his career. People dismissed feelings. They couldn't dismiss consistency. He closed the laptop and leaned back, eyes drifting to the ceiling. The hotel room smelled faintly of fresh linen and citrus cleaner. Luxury always tried to erase what happened before, as if comfort could overwrite memory. But Daniel remembered everything. He remembered his first day in hospitality, editing years ago, walking into another high-end hotel, watching the same subtle shifts. How smiles changed, how voices softened or hardened, how rules bent selectively. At first, he had doubted himself. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe it's just coincidence. But coincidence didn't repeat itself with such precision. Around midnight, his phone buzzed softly. An email from corporate compliance. "Thank you for your preliminary report. We will review in the morning." Daniel didn't reply. He already knew what would come next. Conference calls, controlled apologies, quiet internal discipline. The system would respond, not because it felt guilt, but because it feared documentation. That was always the difference. The next morning, Daniel walked into the lobby early. Daylight transformed the space. Sunlight poured through glass walls, making everything look cleaner, softer. Staff members moved with rehearsed politeness, but now there was tension underneath it. Eyes followed him, not hostile. Careful, The receptionist from the night before stiffened when she saw him approach. Her smile was sharper this time, too practiced. "Good morning, Mr. Carter."
Good morning.
Daniel replied evenly. The manager appeared almost immediately, as if summoned by his presence alone. "May I speak with you?" she asked. Daniel nodded. They stepped aside, near a decorative wall of abstract art. Close enough to be private. Close enough to be observed. "I want to apologize again for last night," she said. "We pride ourselves on inclusivity." Daniel met her eyes. "Then your pride needs better training." She flinched slightly. "We're addressing it internally." "I'm sure you are," Daniel replied. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "You could have caused a scene." "You didn't." Daniel gave a faint, humorless smile. "People expect scenes from men who look like me. Silence unsettles them more." The manager didn't respond. Daniel checked out shortly after. No one tried to stop him this time. No one questioned his presence. Doors opened easily. Smiles came faster. Too fast. Otai The city felt loud after the controlled calm of the hotel. Daniel walked a few blocks before stopping at a small cafe. The barista greeted him warmly, asked about his day without suspicion, handed him coffee without hesitation. Normalcy shouldn't feel like relief, he thought. But sometimes it did. As he sat by the window, sipping slowly, his phone buzzed again. Another email. This one marked urgent. Daniel opened it. Corporate wanted a call. Immediately. He finished his coffee, wiped his hands, and stepped outside to take it. The voice on the other end was professional, controlled. "We've reviewed your documentation," the executive said. "Your findings are concerning." "They're accurate," Daniel replied. "We've placed the hotel under review. Several staff members will be suspended pending retraining." Daniel listened quietly. "We'd like to ask," the executive continued, "what prompted you to stay instead of leaving?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "Because leaving is what people count on." There was silence on the line. "If I leave," he went on, "nothing changes. If I stay calm and record the truth, systems are forced to respond." The executive cleared his throat. "We appreciate your professionalism." Daniel ended the call shortly after. That afternoon, he returned to his office, a modest space compared to the hotels he evaluated. Plain walls, simple desk, no luxury, just purpose. He uploaded his full report into the secure system. Names redacted, publicly, preserved privately. Facts presented without accusation, but impossible to ignore. When he finished, he sat still for a moment. There was no celebration in this work, no applause, just quiet accountability. Days later, an internal memo circulated within the Meridian Crown hotel chain. New policies. Mandatory bias training. Secret shopper programs expanded. Compliance audits increased. Most guests would never know why service felt slightly different. Why staff hesitated before making assumptions. Why excuses became less convenient. Change rarely announced itself loudly. It slipped in through pressure points. A week later, Daniel received a handwritten note in the mail. No return address. "Thank you for not yelling. It made us listen." He folded the note carefully and placed it in his drawer. Not forgiveness. Not redemption, but awareness. That evening, Daniel stood on his balcony, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Thought about how many people were still being told, in 1,000 subtle ways, that they didn't belong. How many swallowed their anger just to make it through the day. He knew one story wouldn't fix everything, but it would be recorded. And sometimes, being recorded was the first step toward being believed. Daniel turned back inside, closing the door behind him softly. Tomorrow, there would be another hotel. Another lobby. Another test of quiet prejudice. And once again, he would arrive calmly. And wait. The following week, Daniel received confirmation that his report had been finalized. It wasn't celebratory. It wasn't dramatic. Just a short message stating that corrective measures had been approved and would be implemented across multiple properties. That was how institutions handled accountability, efficiently, without emotion. Daniel preferred it that way. He didn't need recognition. He needed consistency. Still, something lingered. Not anger, not satisfaction, something closer to fatigue. Feeds. The kind that settled into the shoulders after years of watching the same patterns repeat themselves in different buildings with different names. That afternoon, he found himself thinking about the night at the Meridian Crown more than he expected. Not the confrontation, but the waiting. The way time had stretched while he sat on that leather couch, invisible yet hypervisible at the same time. How everyone had seen him, but no one had really looked at him. He had learned early on that discrimination didn't always announce itself. He hid behind policies, behind tone, behind the word, unfortunately. Unfortunately, the system is down. Unfortunately, we're overbooked. Unfortunately, tonight won't work. Words chosen carefully enough to sound neutral, but sharp enough to push someone out. Daniel's phone buzzed again late in the evening. A new assignment. Another hotel. Different city. He read the details slowly. High-end. Excellent reviews. No prior complaints on record. Those were usually the ones that surprised people the most. 2 days later, he arrived at the new location just before check-in time. The lobby was bright, open, designed to feel welcoming. A smiling concierge nodded at him as he entered. So far, so good. At the desk, the receptionist greeted him warmly and checked his reservation without hesitation. No delays, no excuses, no sideways glances. Daniel took the key, thanked her, and walked toward the elevator. This, too, mattered. Not every place failed the test. And those successes deserved acknowledgement just as much as failures deserved correction. The narrative was never about condemning everyone. It was about exposing patterns where they existed. In his room, Daniel sat by the window and opened his notebook again. This time, the entries were brief. Immediate service. Polite tone. No discrepancies observed. He closed the notebook and allowed himself a small, private smile. Change didn't happen all at once. It happened unevenly, imperfectly. But it happened. Later that night, Daniel went down to the hotel bar. Not to test anything. Just to sit among people, unnoticed. He listened to conversations, watched interactions. A bartender chatted easily with guests of every background. Laughter flowed freely. Normalcy. Again, as he sipped his drink, a man sitting nearby struck up a conversation. Casual. Friendly. No assumptions. Traveling for work? The man asked. Daniel nodded. Something like that. They talked about the city, the weather, nothing important. And that, Daniel realized, was important too. Moments where he didn't have to prove anything. Moments where existence wasn't a statement. When Daniel returned to his room that night, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. The work would continue. It always would. There would be more reports, more uncomfortable truths, more quiet resistance. There would also be moments like this, small confirmations that effort wasn't wasted. Before going to bed, Daniel sent one final note through the compliance system. A short recommendation praising the staff's professionalism at this location. Accountability went both ways. As he turned off the lights, the city outside hummed softly. Tomorrow, he would move on again. Another hotel. Another lobby. Another chance to observe, to document, to challenge, without raising his voice. He lay back, hands folded over his chest, breathing evenly. The world didn't change because people shouted louder. It changed because someone stayed long enough to be counted. And Daniel Carter intended to keep staying.